Xiaomi is a company that is widely known for innovations and phones that offer way more than competing models in the same price range. Even though it has been less than 12 months since the release of their previous flagship device, Xiaomi is already unveiling its successor. We're of course talking about the Mi 11 Ultra, and as its name suggests, it represents best of the best that Xiaomi engineers can deliver at the moment, and is tailored for most demanding users. It seems that this might be the first time that Xiaomi has a device that may rival other popular phone manufacturer flagships, perhaps even do a couple of things better, and we're certainly excited about that. We've already seen that the biggest authority when it comes to cameras, the DxOMark, has declared the Mi 11 Ultra the phone with the best cameras in the world, with claims of excellent performance in many areas. And I know that some of you might question the judgment of DxOMark, but it's something we have to mention. Along with such an exceptional camera system, the Mi 11 Ultra also shines in several different areas, which, after all, is a prerequisite for a flagship device coming from one of the leading phone manufacturers. Now, at first glance, the Mi 11 Ultra is a fairly large phone, about the size of a Note 20 Ultra, only a bit narrower and slightly more rounded edges. This is definitely not a device for everyone, but primarily for fans of large phones who usually consider Pro, Max, Plus, and Ultra models when choosing a new phone, primarily due to their size. For most operations, one-handed use is simply not an option, even if you disregard a 20:9 aspect ratio. If we ignore the otherwise hard-to-ignore camera block on the back for a moment, holding the Mi 11 Ultra feels like picking up one of the premium Huawei phones from last year's lineup. The phone feels solid and high quality, and even home screen wallpapers fit the overall premium feel. We also have to add that the Mi 11 Ultra comes with IP68 certificate of resistance to dust and water, which we see for the first time on a Xiaomi phone. The front of the Mi 11 Ultra has a classic look with a powerful looking screen that extends over the rounded edges with a fine curvature on the sides to give the impression that the screen is larger than it actually is. The back of the phone, however, is completely different since 1/3 of its surface is covered by a huge camera body packed with a secondary screen. While we have no doubts that such a powerful camera system had to be so large, we have to say that the bump on the back does seem a bit too much and will probably spark the debate online whether it fits the phone design or not. This is the first time we have a phone on our test with such a chunky camera housing, which feels like it was added as an afterthought on top of an already elegant device. But one thing no one can deny is that it has a unique design which is just different enough to stand out from the rest of its competition. However, the most unusual feature is the small screen on the back that you can wake up by double tapping and see information such as time, date, and battery status. The software allows customization similar to what we see on the always-on screens, and its primary purpose is to use it as an auxiliary screen in order to take much better selfies with a shiny new main camera. The image on the small screen is limited in size and resolution, but it will be just enough to help you frame the selfie well. You can use one of the volume keys as a shutter button, but this kind of shooting will take a bit of juggling until you get used to it, since the screen is active the whole time and can be touched accidentally. It took us several attempts to get used to the grip of the phone, and we ended up pressing several options on the screen in the process, but once you get used to it, it all works like a charm. From our point of view, this whole camera system is just too big and heavy, which leads to the awkward weight balance since the center of the gravity of the device is moved to its top half, which tends to be rather annoying when taking pictures. This will be a problem for all high-end Samsung users, as their flagship phones were always balanced in terms of weight distribution, so the Mi 11 Ultra design is a great idea with a significant drawback. As expected in this class, the back is made entirely out of ceramic, and the perfectly polished surface of the back leaves the impression of a premium device, a high degree of elegance which fits perfectly with the aluminum frame and the glass screen. All three parts have different colors and made of different materials and are extremely beautifully composed with fine, at times impeccable transitions between the different surfaces. The massive metal frame is thin at the edges and expands on the right side to house a power button and volume control buttons, as well as on the edges in order to strengthen the structure and mitigate the consequences of an accidental drop or mechanical impact. We didn't like that the screen frames are a bit thicker in the corners than on the rest of the phone, making the active area visually smaller. The screen itself is an AMOLED type, which is 6.81-inch diagonal and screen-to-body ratio of excellent 91.4%. It is one of the best screens available for mobile devices, which means wide 1440p resolution, HDR10+, and Dolby Vision certifications, 1 billion colors, 120Hz dynamic refresh, and exceptional brightness. The entire body is IP68 certified, which means water and dust resistance in most situations you're likely to find yourself in, plus the latest generation of the Gorilla Glass Victus layer is there to protect the screen. Display performance is exceptional with a dynamic refresh rate, precise colors, density of 515 pixels per inch, and excellent brightness up to 1700 nits. For example, the S21 Ultra has 1500. Together, they simply make a screen worthy of top-class phone, which will not disappoint you in any situation. With the use of software, you're able to reduce the resolution to Full HD+, but that would honestly be a shame given the exceptional display quality. The screen, of course, is made by Samsung, and it truly makes us wonder why they decided to sell the best screen they had in their arsenal to an expanding and threatening competitor. The side buttons are thin, with a nice travel and a bit more resistance, which helps avoid accidental presses. Although their positioning is good, we didn't like the wiggling of the keys, which is not acceptable on a phone in this price range. But then again, this is not the first time we see flaws like these on high-end phones. The power button is positioned exactly where your thumb would rest on the phone, but due to the dimensions of the phone, you would normally be able to reach only the volume down key without adjusting your grip. We did say at the beginning of the video that this phone is definitely not for everyone and is not intended for one-handed use. The massive aluminum frame has a very fine brushed metal texture that looks like something between a matte and glossy finish. The top and bottom side of the phone have flatter edges, which seem to be trend these days in smartphone world in order to highlight the phone's elegance. At the bottom side, there is a USB-C port, one of 2 speakers, one of 2 microphones, and there's also 2 nano SIM cards. What we didn't particularly like is the fact that despite the class Mi 11 Ultra belongs to, it still uses USB-C 2.0 port, while the competition has long switched to USB 3.2 standard. This price range is very unforgiving to such mistakes, and this is something Xiaomi engineers really need to understand. People who are willing to spend large amounts of money on the phone usually want best of the best, and they do not accept compromises like USB 2.0. Just so we're clear, I myself rarely end up transferring the data from my phone to my computer in everyday use, but we often do transfer photos and videos during our reviews, and the extra time really adds up with the Mi 11 Ultra. The top side of the phone is quite interesting since its flat surface doesn't seem to level with the frame, but it's a bit receded. However, it all fits really well, and with the IP68 rating, you shouldn't care much about it. On this flat top plate, there's another speaker and a microphone pair, as well as an infrared port. We also noted that the speaker grill on top has 4 holes, while on the bottom it is stylized and narrow to the middle of the edges, slightly breaking the classic design monotony. The hardware, as expected, consists of Snapdragon 888 paired with 8 or 12 GB of RAM and 256 or 512 GB of fast UFS 3.1 memory. We have talked about the performance of the currently strongest mobile chipset on the planet many times now, and there is not really much to add. The chipset guarantees top performance for the next couple of years. The only real flaw we found on the Snapdragon 888 devices was the heat, which was usually present during high workload when playing games, and Mi 11 Ultra is no exception and can get quite hot right below the huge camera body. To confirm this, we performed 2 separate tests. We simulated real-life use scenario and performed a 3-way video call between Mi 11 Ultra, Samsung S21 Ultra, and iPhone 12 Pro Max, and measured the temperatures using a thermal camera. The body that packed the most heat was the S21 Ultra with around 40 degrees Celsius. Mi 11 Ultra was just behind it with just above 39 degrees, while the iPhone 12 Pro Max was chilling at 33 degrees Celsius. Our second test was the 3D Mark's Wildlife Stress Test. On its 8th or 9th run, the Mi 11 Ultra overheated and stopped the further testing, since its graphical processor was using its full power until the system decided to shut down. We know that Samsung's Exynos lowers the frequency under high load, but the fact that it completed the test still stands, alongside the iPhone 12 Pro Max. A minute before Mi 11 Ultra gave out, we saw a noticeably higher frame rate than one found on its competitors, and while the S21 Ultra and 12 Pro Max were measured at 41 degrees Celsius, the Mi 11 Ultra was clearly overheating at 48.5 degrees, and we presume that the system just gave out at 50 degrees. Now, let's just point out that this most likely won't happen to anyone because there are only a few games that can load the system to such an extent, but one thing for sure, the Snapdragon 888 is a hot chipset. When it comes to communications, the Mi 11 Ultra also supports the new Wi-Fi 6E running at 6 GHz, a new spectrum that has recently been opened up for Wi-Fi use in addition to the popular 2.4 and 5 GHz. There's also the latest Bluetooth 5.2 with aptX HD support for high 24-bit music quality over a Bluetooth connection, and the phone is compatible with almost all geolocation systems. As we're used to from Xiaomi, there is a handy infrared blaster as well as NFC, while support for FM radio is missing alongside its 3.5mm audio connector. What we have to praise is the sound quality on the stereo speakers. Excellent sound balance on both sides is something that is rarely seen nowadays, with very strong speakers and nice low frequency response, as much as it's possible with such a small device. Xiaomi seems to have made great use of its large case, allowing sound to resonate inside, resulting in one of the best integrated stereo systems on the smartphone we've come across. Unlike Samsung's latest models, Xiaomi uses a very fast optical fingerprint detection sensor on its phones instead of an ultrasound one, which deserves all the praise. Alternatively, you can use face detection software, but please keep in mind that this is a software much less secure than a fingerprint. Software-wise, the Mi 11 Ultra uses the Android 11 with MIUI 12.03 GUI version. Some YouTube reviewers got the review unit with a MIUI 12.5, which we didn't get even after a week the phone has been with us. The software differences are almost non-existent compared to the Mi 11, except for a couple of extra features in the camera software. And now when it comes to the camera system, you already know that DxOMark has declared the Mi 11 Ultra as the smartphone with the best camera in the world. We know from experience that DxOMark rarely makes mistakes, but we still wanted to check the claims and see what the camera has to offer. Let's start off with the camera hardware. Unlike the Mi 10 Ultra, the new model has a new main camera, a new ultra-wide camera, and has said goodbye to the 2x telephoto lens, which is a completely legitimate choice. The 50-megapixel main camera is very wide with 24mm focal length and f1.95 aperture. It has a large 1.4 micrometer pixels, a large Samsung ISOCELL sensor, and dual pixel pro phase detection autofocusing. This camera has optical stabilization, and the sensor groups 4 adjacent pixels, producing photos of 12.5 megapixels by default. That's 4080 x 3060 pixels. The Dual Pixel Pro focusing system divides each pixel vertically and diagonally to better measure contrast, with keeping in mind that standard dual pixel systems, the pixels are only divided vertically. Also, the new sensor has the ability to use different HDR modes depending on the scene. There are two types of HDR systems. One is the Smart ISO Pro HDR, which is formed in a single shot, but each pixel performs two readings that the camera combines in order to achieve the widest possible dynamic range. This faster system is used to preview images, videos, and images with medium dynamic range. Stacking HDR mode is used for high contrast scenes, and in this mode, the Mi 11 Ultra takes several photos that are then merged to create a single photo with high dynamic range. The ultra-wide camera features a 48-megapixel sensor that also uses quad-Bayer technology, resulting in 12-megapixel images. It is a sensor with 0.8 micrometer pixels and an aperture of f2.2 in front of a wide-angle lens that covers 128 degrees. We will also mention that this camera is used for taking macro photos, but we would advise not getting too close to the subject due to a noticeable wide-angle distortion. The telephoto camera is a periscope type and it's inherited from the Mi 10 Ultra. It is also a 48 megapixel lens with suspicion that the same characteristics as the one on the ultra-wide angle camera with a smaller aperture of f4.1, which is expected in zoom cameras. Of course, optical stabilization takes care of retaining detail and offers relatively steady shots at high levels of digital zoom, 120x to be exact. In addition to the three lenses, the camera system has a time-of-flight sensor and a multispectral color temperature sensor for greater accuracy and more realistic display of fine shades. The front camera is the same one we saw on the Mi 10 Ultra. It is a 20 megapixel f2.3 camera of 27mm focal length with 0.8 micrometer pixels that records in full sensor resolution without pixel merging and other modern software magic. The main camera delivers exceptional daytime photos with plenty of detail and almost no noise during the day and night. We have noticed that if you leave the HDR on automatically, it may cause a small loss of detail in moving objects, but only in rare situations. Dynamic range is almost like on Huawei phones, which are well known for that, with a lot of detail in both shadows and highlights. When it comes to the amount of detail and noise, they're on the opposite sides. Improving one makes the other aspect worse. The Mi 11 Ultra finds excellent balance, allowing just enough noise to keep the level of detail high in all conditions, even in the darkest parts of the frame. Focusing is lightning fast in all light conditions, which is great. What you see on preview screen is what you will get on a finished photo, which is very important for composition and framing. We notice that there is a slight delay from the moment you press the shutter button until the moment when the picture is finished, which we did not like very much. We believe that this is a consequence of complex software and hardware operations that must be performed to get the final image, from HDR stacking through pixel merging, noise reduction, and everything else. The problem with large sensors is always the shallow focus range and the tendency to get blurry subjects in the background. Xiaomi solves this in software using the AI algorithm that detects faces in the background and sharpens them, a solution we've already seen with Huawei, Samsung, and Apple's top-class phones. The colors are great, with very faithful reproduction without oversaturated photos and without side effects, characteristics of excessive software processing and weaker sensors. The white balance is great even in solutions where you wouldn't expect it, as well as the skin color of the subject, especially useful when using the main camera for selfies. In dark environment, the phone handles shadow well and records a lot of detail, both in dark and light parts of the frame, without any special action required by the user. In the dark, Xiaomi Mi 11 shows its true colors, capturing details even in contrasting situations without much noise. When the scene is too dark, the Mi 11 Ultra activates a semi-night mode that helps capture of the detail in part of the frame that are poorly lit. You just have to keep in mind that your hand must be steady, because despite stabilization, you will sometimes get a less sharp photo. Also, forget about taking pictures of moving subjects like cars on the street, because the end result will almost always look smudged. Color detection is excellent, as well as sharpness. Noise reduction is among the best we've seen, with excellent dynamic range. Night mode enhances dark shots, but regular mode is so good that images are awkwardly sharpened in night mode, so this is one of the few phones that could easily go without a night mode. Despite the challenging conditions, one of the largest sensors on the market guarantees fantastic photos that will put to shame many DSLRs and competing phones, justifying the Mi 11 Ultra's title of the best smartphone camera ever. Note that all of the above also applies when you use the main camera as a selfie camera. It is necessary to activate the secondary screen from the menu options in the upper right corner, but the results are more than obvious, so good that we almost did not use the front camera at all, although it also provides good performance. The front camera has a high resolution but lags behind in almost all other aspects compared to the main sensor, so it doesn't make much sense to spend too much time talking about the differences between these two cameras, because it's simply not fair to compare them. The lower contrast of the secondary screen can make it a little difficult to use on a very bright day, so sometimes you may be tempted to use the front camera for a more controlled shot. In these situations, you will notice the front camera offers good color detection, dynamic range, and skin tones. The zoom camera offers a decent level of detail at the maximum optical zoom, which is 5x. The colors are very similar to those on the main camera, and the sharpness is at the high level. Optical stabilization helps, especially in 10x and 120x digital modes. While 10x zoom is decent with a visible loss of detail, when you shift into overdrive with 120x zoom, you will not get a still shot even if you use a tripod. While the phone is in your hand, every breath, micro tremor, and heartbeat will be reflected on the frame, which will be swaying left and right. We don't recommend using this mode unless you are trying to capture something that cannot be seen with the naked eye. We got the impression that the Mi 11 Ultra telephoto camera makes sharper and more detailed images than the competition, such as the Mate 40 Pro and the S21 Ultra, but we leave such claims for direct comparison tests in near future. The wide-angle camera captures a very wide frame and takes exceptional photos expected of a camera of a phone in this class. The lack of the focusing system is painfully obvious, and it's just not clear to us why Xiaomi decided to skip this feature, which would significantly improve the performance of this camera. The dynamic range is excellent, which is not characteristic of cameras of this type. There's a lot of detail in the middle of the frame, but their level declines noticeably towards the edges of the frame. The colors are slightly warmer than on the main and telephoto cameras, which is more visible in the sky and green areas. Everything else is great, from the lens geometry correction to sharpness and dynamic range. The Mi 11 Ultra also uses this camera for macro photography. Without a special macro lens, this camera gives a lot of detail thanks to its high resolution, but requires you to move away from the subject. Lens distortion is noticeable here, so don't count on excessively good macro photos. And although it's a wide-angle camera, it is amazing how much Mi 11 Ultra manages to keep noise under control, allowing for great photos, perhaps the best in a wide-angle camera yet. It is not realistic to expect the sharpness of the main camera, but activating night mode will knock you off your feet. By activating the night mode, everything improves with minimal penalties in terms of noise. The shadows open up, the amount of detail is much higher, and the textures are visible on the parts of the frame that were blurred in the regular shooting mode. Those few seconds are well worth it, and it's our recommendation to use this mode whenever the situation allows it. The camera also does well at night, and with the right amount of light, you can count on very good photos with a night mode that does not work wonders but can help. Again, a calm hand in night mode is extremely important. The Mi 11 Ultra provides 8K shots at 24 fps, 4K at 30 and 60 fps, and 1080p in a range of 30 to 1920 fps for slow motion shots. HDR10 Plus recording and gyroscopic electronic stabilization, in addition to optically stabilized lenses, are supported. The only problem we noticed is the manifestation of the flare effect with a strong light source every now and then, which the Mi 11 Ultra does not handle very well. 4K shots at 30 and 60 fps are exceptional in every sense. Sharp, detailed, focused, well stabilized with good exposure, frame balance, and color reproduction. The video from the wide-angle camera are also outstanding. Yes, the colors are a little warmer and the dynamic range is not the best, especially the detail of the darker parts of the frame, but everything else is great. The shots are fluid, there's plenty of detail, so you can use this camera whenever the frame of the main one is not wide enough. Simply, the video is so good that we have no real objections, and we claim with certainty that this is the best video recording that any phone today can offer without any real competition. The battery is one of the things on this phone that we can consider both an upgrade and a downgrade. While one of the main features of the Mi 10 Ultra was the 120-watt charger that charges the battery in almost 50% in 5 minutes and just over 20 minutes to charge from 0 to 100, with the Mi 11 Ultra the situation is a bit different. The battery capacity has increased from 4,500 mAh to 5,000 mAh, but the 120-watt charger has been replaced by a 67-watt model, which is expected to have poorer performance. Unfortunately, the phone arrived to us without an official package, so we cannot check the official data on charging performance, though according to our experiences, it is usually very close in reality. It will take you a little less than 40 minutes to charge from 0 to 100, whether you're using a wired or wireless charger. Of course, reversible charging of another phone that supports wireless charging is also supported. Battery life. A feature that was always a big problem for flagships will perform the same as the competitors, so do not expect more than a day of use because it's simply not realistic given the hardware they are packing. A fast charger will help you recharge in less than an hour, but let's be real, with a Snapdragon 888, awesome camera system, and a huge screen that are all huge power consumers, can we really expect more out of this battery? Our 10-hour YouTube playback test left this phone with only 36% of the remaining battery capacity, which is a rather poor result. It is truly a paradox that a phone with an Exynos chipset is packing a better battery life than a Snapdragon. And honestly, times really do change. As a whole, the Mi 11 Ultra manages to combine almost all of the best technological achievements of today, except for a foldable screen. Even with a huge camera on the back, this phone is beautiful, carefully designed and engineered in every way. The fastest chipset, exceptional screen, the best camera in the world, 2 screens, and many other little things will delight you on this phone. The phone's shortcomings are a USB 2.0 port as well as a poor weight balance. If the camera body had to be so huge, Xiaomi should have done more to balance it. The battery life is something we didn't expect to disappoint, especially given Xiaomi's track record of phones that all have excellent battery life. MIUI is a software that has been around longer than most competing solutions, and same as all Chinese graphical interfaces has its roots in iOS, which is something not everyone likes. It also comes with ads, and even though they can be turned off, this is not something an end user should think about when buying a phone for this much money. MIUI is not nearly as evolved enough as the likes of Samsung's One UI or Apple iOS, and that is a big problem. The Mi 11 Ultra brings a different design, a phone with fantastic hardware that will never let you down, except maybe an evening when your battery runs out, and the best camera of today. If this was the phone that came out of Cupertino, everyone would be losing their minds now as the best phone ever, and no one would even mind the big bump on the back. The Mi 11 Ultra is a phone that made a great impression on us in the studio and definitely poses a great threat to the competition. We can't say it's the best phone out there, but certainly among the best at the moment. The phone should be available starting the middle of May, and due to high demand, it will be available only through the Xiaomi online community for a starting price of $1,500 US. Thank you for watching the Mi 11 Ultra review on the Bench House channel. Share us your thoughts below the video in the comment section, and if you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like. To stay tuned for more tech reviews, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. My name is Marco, and I will see you next time.